All right, I think we're ready to start. All right, thank you for this opportunity to give this presentation on regenerative agriculture, best tool for combating climate change at the Illinois Stewardship Alliance Illinois Soil Health Week event. My name is Don Vaselli. I'm a climate reality project leader trained in 2020 and a member of the Chicago Metro chapter. I serve on several committees and am the chairperson of the Regenerative Agriculture Campaign Committee. We have been in existence since, I believe, February of 2021. And so we've had 3 years of collecting information, and what the slides I'm presenting, a lot of it, we have developed resources that we have uncovered and researched over the past 3 years as we ended up focusing on the 2024 Farm Bill, which I'll talk about later in the presentation. But I do have, we have a Google folder, a website where we keep all our resource material, and we'll talk a little bit about what we have in there and the policy recommendations that we have been advocating for the Farm Bill. All right, the Illinois Soil Health Week has something for everyone. Farmers looking for practical management strategies to improve soil quality. Eaters who want to understand the impact of healthy soil on our nutrition and climate. Conservation advocates wanting to stay up to date on work that protects our shared resources. Anyone with an interest in climate resilience, sustainability, and healthy food systems. This goes all week, by the way, March 4th through the 10th. There's presentations almost every day, and I believe there's a lobby day event down in Springfield on March 6th. If you haven't signed up for it, that'd probably be a good thing to do. This presentation will explain how regenerative agriculture farming practices combat climate change by improving soil health to sequester more carbon in the soil and reduce carbon dioxide, CO2, in our atmosphere that is causing global warming. I will also explain the benefits of our farmers, ranchers, and eaters, and the reasons why supporting climate-friendly policies in the 2024 Farm Bill and Inflation Reduction Act are so important. The Regenerative Agriculture Coalition is part of Al Gore's Climate Reality Project, an international organization that recruits, trains, and mobilizes individuals to educate the public about climate change and much more. There are 127 US chapters in 39 states with over 18,000 members. The RA Coalition is focused on nature-based solutions that reduce greenhouse gases in our atmosphere, causing global warming, with the goal of achieving net zero emissions before 2050. Today, I plan to briefly cover the list of topics in this presentation. Climate change is undeniable. The carbon cycle, regenerative agriculture definition, carbon sequestration definition, RA principles, practices, and shifting the paradigm. Benefits of RA, the pace of change, tilling practices, the 2024 Farm Bill, what you can do to help, and what farmers and ranchers can do to help. A little bit about my background. I was raised on a 160-acre family dairy farm in Weberville, just outside of East Lansing, Michigan. I am a retired product marketing professional. Most of my experience was in product marketing for data communication, telecommunication, cellular, and wireless internet companies in the Chicagoland area. I graduated from Michigan State University in advertising and marketing. I received my MBA from Lake Forest Graduate School of Management. I officially retired in 2015 and enjoying it, by the way, and keep busy with volunteer work and my writing hobby. This is my family farmhouse. I spent 10 years helping my parents farm the land using traditional farming practices. Organic farming was not in our vocabulary. Regenerative agriculture practices were not known or practiced at the time. Farmers in the late 50s and early 60s probably would have looked unfavorably upon any farmers trying to turn away from conventional farming practices. This was my family farm around 1960. We had 160 acres that included around 30 acres of woods and wetland. My family moved from a suburb in Detroit to the farm in 1956. We raised milking cows, pigs, goats, and horses. We planted corn, wheat, rye, oats, and clover or alfalfa for the cows. It was a traditional family farm with around 110 acres of tillable land. I spent 10 years of my life farming before leaving for college. I never thought I would be involved with farming again. My father would be amazed at what is happening with farmers and ranchers today. There was no emphasis at all on regenerative farming practices as we know it today. Climate change was not on anyone's radar screen. Soil health was not the primary focus of farmers' concern at the time. Only how much yield per acre could be achieved on the land. After I went to college, my father switched from dairy cows to beef cattle. He sold a few beef cattle each year for tax purposes. He ended up having some of the oldest cows in the state. Michigan State University found out and came out to look at them, since most dairy cows and beef cattle live less than 5 years. Some of the cows were over 10 years old. The productive lifespan of average cows is between 2.5 and 4 years in most developed dairy industries. Cows calf for the first time at 2 years of age, which brings their total lifespan from birth to death between 4.5 to 6 years. The natural lifespan of dairy cattle is approximately 20 years. Age at slaughter typically can be from 12 to 22 months of age for the high quality grade market. The reason for the range in age is that some calves are weaned and go directly to a feeding facility and are finished for slaughter. Many beef, pork, chickens, and turkeys today are raised in large confined animal feeding operations called CAFOs, which do more harm than good to our environment. Now I want to focus on climate change. When I was growing up in the 50s and 60s on the farm, the climate was predictable. Then it started to change. The 1967 blizzard caught many Michigan residents off guard. In several locations, the temperatures were in the 50s and 60s, and then a couple of days later, on January 26th and 27th, the blizzard dumped lots of really heavy snow in a relatively short period. In Lansing, the temperature was 66 degrees on January 24th, 1967. 2 days later, 24 inches of snow had fallen. I remember when winter was cold and long, with 40-mile-an-hour blizzards that would last all day, leaving snow drifts 10 plus feet high on either side of the road. We would dig tunnels in the snow drifts for fun, in spite of the danger. In the fall, starting in October, we would get rain drizzles that lasted for days. Once it didn't stop for 2 weeks on and off. In the spring, it was cold until end of May, then turned warm. Seasons were more predictable and operated like clockwork. In the summer, it would get hot and humid, but not last very long. We have the same. If you don't like the weather, wait 10 minutes. Sunny days never lasted 3 days in a row. Here's the latest report from the UN's IPCC Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. States unequivocally that humans are the reason our climate is warming the planet. They call it a code red for humanity. This chart shows our average surface temperature has risen 1.2 degrees Celsius since 1850. The IPCC goal is to keep the temperature from rising over 1.5 degrees Celsius by 2025 to prevent irreversible climate change events. Carbon dioxide, CO2 emissions, is the reason the atmosphere is warming. These levels have already risen to historic levels. The chart shows that CO2 levels were consistently in the 260 to 300 parts per million range over the last 800,000 years. This data is from ice core samples that show historical CO2 concentration levels. Everything changed with the beginning of the industrial age, and especially in the last 70 years since World War II. Here's another look at atmospheric carbon dioxide levels. Things changed dramatically after 1950. In 2013, CO2 levels surpassed 400 parts per million for the first time in recorded history. This graph shows even better how fast CO2 levels have risen since 1880. We averaged 315 parts per million of CO2 in our atmosphere in 1960. We reached a high of 424 parts per million in May of 2023. Since the industrial era began around 1750, CO2 concentrations have risen by about 50%. 20 of the hottest years on record have occurred since 2000. The 4 hottest were in 2016, 2019, 2020, and 2023 was the hottest year yet. Greenhouse gases are measured in units called global warming potential, GWP. It measures how much heat each type of gas traps compared to carbon dioxide. Methane, nitrous oxide, and fluorinated gases trap much more heat than carbon dioxide. However, the other chart shows how much emissions of each type of gas is in our atmosphere. As you can see, carbon dioxide emits 76% of the gas in our atmosphere. I would like to shift now and talk about the carbon cycle. About 200 billion metric tons of carbon move throughout the planet. This includes the atmosphere, biosphere, which are plants and animals, soil and ocean. We have knocked the carbon cycle out of balance, mostly by burning fossil fuels, but many other things as well, such as poor farming practices, contribute to the problem. Nature uses photosynthesis to draw down excess carbon from our atmosphere. The lack of ground cover, deforestation, use of chemical fertilizers, pesticides and herbicides, and other practices prevent nature from doing its job. Our soil can store up to 10 gigatons, that's billions, of carbon every year if the soil is healthy. Currently, we are emitting around 11 gigatons of excess CO2 each year due to poor soil practices. Here is a better look at the carbon storage capacity of our world. The atmosphere holds around 750 billion tons or gigatons of carbon. The biosphere holds 550 billion tons. The soil holds 2,300 billion tons of carbon, 3 times as much as our atmosphere and 4 times as much as our biosphere. It is estimated that up to 900 gigatons of excess legacy carbon is currently in our atmosphere. Even if we reach net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2040, we still have all this legacy greenhouse gases to draw down to stop global warming effects. RA practices can help reduce this excess amount dramatically per several scientific sources, up to 80 gigatons or more per year, if RA practices are implemented worldwide. The primary reason is 1 gigaton of carbon sequestered in the soil can draw down 3.67 gigatons of CO2 from our atmosphere through photosynthesis. So what is regenerative agriculture? Regenerative agriculture is a system of farming principles and practices that increases biodiversity, enriches soils, improves watersheds, and enhances the entire ecosystem of the farm. Through photosynthesis, carbon is captured in the soil by pulling CO2 out of the atmosphere to reverse the damages caused by climate change. It offers increased yields, resilience to climate instability, improved soil health, and many other benefits for farming and ranching communities. What is carbon sequestration? Carbon sequestration is the long-term removal or capture of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere to slow down or reverse atmospheric CO2 pollution and to mitigate or reverse global warming. Examples of carbon sequestration will follow. Let's start with regenerative agriculture. It tends to be governed by 5 basic principles. Minimum tillage to prevent erosion and build soil structure. Keep residue on soil to absorb moisture and protect the soil. Maintaining a living root system to absorb nutrients and feed microbes. Crop diversity using cover crops and crop rotation to maintain soil health. Integrating livestock to fertilize plants and provide nutritional food. Here's a quote from Zach Laughlin, 2020. The effect of practicing regenerative agriculture is that it restores soil health. For farmers, this means greater yields, the resiliency of the soils to various stresses like droughts and excess moisture, decreased need for outside input costs like fertilizers and pesticides, and increased profits. For consumers, increases in soil health lead to more nutrient-dense foods, a pollinator-friendly environment, wildlife habitats, erosion control, pollution runoff control, and carbon sequestration through photosynthesis, thus helping to reverse climate change. In short, it helps to solve many of the world's environmental problems. Regenerative agriculture includes these key agricultural practices. This includes things like crop rotation, no or low-till plowing, use of cover crops, animal grazing, composting, agroforestry, and more. Through the practices of regenerative agriculture, the soil health can be restored, enabling a greater level of carbon sequestration to be achieved with the use of these agricultural practices. Some of these practices will also help to increase the soil's ability to sequester carbon on pasture land. Here's another look at the type of regenerative agriculture practices farmers can use to improve soil health. Through the use of these methods, soil health can be restored, enabling a greater level of carbon sequestration to be achieved without the use of harmful and costly chemical additives. I will discuss the increasing biodiversity component in more detail later in this presentation. Here's an example of carbon sequestration from growing cover crops. Cover crops are different from growing cash crops sold for profit, such as corn or soybeans. Cover crops are used to improve soil health by protecting from soil erosion and nutrient loss. Cover crops help control weeds, pests, and other diseases and hold more water in the soil. The right cover crops increases biodiversity and provides nutrients for plant growth without the need for chemical inputs like fertilizer. Here's another example of carbon sequestration from no-till farming practices. No-till plowing builds healthy soil that increases the amount of carbon sequestration and water absorption, leading to higher crop yields. Soil microorganisms thrive in healthy soil, which increases nutrient cycling, suppressing plant diseases to grow more nutrient-dense foods, crops. When soil is plowed, carbon is released into the atmosphere, increasing greenhouse gas emissions that warm the planet. This slide shows the type of tillage method used by 75% of U.S. farmers in 2017. No-till, no plowing was used on 37% of U.S. cropland. Low-till, reduced plowing was used on 35% of U.S. cropland. Conventional plowing was used on 28% of U.S. cropland. We need a higher percentage of farmers to practice no or low tilling methods to reach net zero greenhouse gas emissions by the year 2050 to mitigate climate change effects. No-till percentages are growing in the U.S. Companies such as Cargill are promoting adoption. Cargill plans to advance RA practices among row crops. They plan to implement RA on 10 million acres of farmland and rangelands in North America by 2030. General Mills plans to advance RA practices on 1 million acres of farmland by 2030. Other food producers are planning similar programs. It is estimated that global food system accounts for about 33% of greenhouse gas emissions and 70% of water consumption. Here's another chart showing similar results we have discussed. Growth in low-till or no-till farming is growing steadily, especially in the coastal regions. As mentioned earlier, around 37% of tillable acreage is in the U.S. is no-till, and 35% is reduced tillage. This chart shows the amount of land farmed organically in the world by regions. It has grown tenfold since 1999. The farming culture is starting to change for the better. This chart actually shows how fast RA practices are growing worldwide. RA practices have increased 15% per year on average since 2008, or 93% over the last 10 years. This equals around 14.7% of total global cropland per a recent food and agricultural study. This is very good, but it must change even faster to stop climate change and reverse global warming by 2050. Can we really reverse climate change with regenerative agriculture? The answer is yes. We can reverse climate change and stop global warming using nature's own solutions for pulling CO2 out of our atmosphere. The solutions can be implemented today. We don't have to wait for technological solutions that are costly, mostly unproven, and potentially harmful to our environment. I will show you how this is done in the following slides. How can we do this? By using soil as a carbon sink to pull down carbon dioxide from our atmosphere naturally. This is called carbon sequestration. This is a proven process that can restore balance and stop global warming. It is possible to pull down more carbon than we emit each year with the right land management practices. So how does carbon sequestration work? Plants draw down carbon dioxide through photosynthesis and pass the carbon sugar molecules through its root systems. Soil carbon comes from organic matter decomposition, which, if not covered, is released back into our atmosphere. Soil stores 3.67 times more carbon than exists in the atmosphere. Plants absorb atmospheric carbon dioxide during photosynthesis, returning plant residues into the soil, contributing to soil carbon. Much of this carbon ultimately returns to the atmosphere as soil microbes decompose, releasing carbon dioxide. Soil carbon stores can increase if the rate of carbon input exceeds the rate of microbial decomposition. Carbon sequestration refers to this process of storing carbon in soil organic matter and thus removing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Maintaining a living root system are key to regenerative agriculture practices. Roots store carbon and feed the microorganisms that in turn provide nutrients for plants. Together, they build healthy soil, needed to regenerate the land and help mitigate global warming. How this works is explained in the next slide. It's called the nutrient cycle. This is a nutrient cycle as defined by Dr. Elaine Ingham's Soil Food Web. Nature uses plant root systems to grow and feed microorganisms in healthy soil, called soil organic matter, or SOM. This biology is what creates healthy soil to grow plants. There are three principles that need to be understood. One, nature exists as a series of relationships with each organism playing a role, as shown in this slide. Two, nutrient cycling is key. Organisms consume what they need to live and grow and changes nutrients into food sources, beneficial for other organisms. Three, diversity is key. Different organisms cycle nutrients for each predator or prey. The whole system is needed to maintain the soil food web. Healthy soil is approximately 45% minerals, 25% water, 25% air, and 5% organic matter. Microorganisms require air and water to survive and grow to feed plants and build healthy soil. Plowing destroys the structure needed for microorganisms and results in compacted dirt that cannot absorb water or prevent soil erosion and pollution runoff. Building healthy soil is a key to regenerative agriculture practices. Now that we know how carbon is stored on our planet, we can turn our attention to the condition of our topsoil and how farmers can benefit from implementing RE practices. First, here are some facts. The Midwest Corn Belt farmland has lost a third of its carbon-rich topsoil through erosion. Generating 3 centimeters of topsoil takes nature up to 1,000 years. Only 60 years of farming left if soil degradation continues, per a UN official. About a third of the world's soil has already been degraded per the Food and Agricultural Organization. This slide shows the extent of soil degradation in the world. 3.2 billion people are suffering now. Agriculture needs to close the 11 gigaton gap between carbon emissions and CO2 drawdown to keep global warming between 2 degrees Celsius. Regenerative agriculture practices can easily achieve this goal if healthy soil farming practices are implemented by all farmers and ranchers. This slide shows what regenerative agriculture does. It shifts the paradigm. Instead of competing with nature, we partner with nature. We stop using conventional industrial or factory farming methods that rely on monoculture crops, synthetic fertilizers, and deforestation to feed animals. All of this is causing desertification of our topsoil at a rate that will result in a loss of 2/3 of our landmass to deserts by 2100. We need to cover this soil when not in use. Now we can turn to the benefits of regenerative agriculture, not only to farmers and ranchers, but for the world. Benefit number 1, RA can decrease greenhouse gas emissions. RA is a key solution to combating climate change. Agriculture alone is directly responsible for about 10% of greenhouse gas emissions. Together with all land and food production, RA accounts for around 25% or more of greenhouse gas. We currently release 43 to 50 gigatons of CO2 in our atmosphere each year. Studies have shown that implementing RA practices can pull down or sequester up to 37.7 or more tons of CO2 per hectare per year. That's equal to 15.3 tons per acre per year. If only 5 to 10% of worldwide farmers practice RA, we can sequester more than 100%. That's 45.12 gigatons versus 43 gigatons of the carbon we release into our atmosphere each year. If 100% of farmers practice RA, we can effectively sequester more than 80 gigatons of carbon per year. Benefit number 2, RA has the potential to reverse climate change. If we can decrease the amount of greenhouse gases in our atmosphere each year, we can potentially reverse climate change. This is another study from the Rodell Institute on the effectiveness of RA practices. The vast majority of greenhouse gas emissions come from carbon dioxide, CO2, around 38 out of 55 gigatons per year. Regenerative grazing systems and cropping systems alone can draw down 50 gigatons of CO2 each year if practiced globally. Benefit number 3, RA improves yields and nutrition. These results per acre are based on farm trials by the Rodell Institute in Kutztown, Pennsylvania, over decades of testing. Farm yields using no-till or no plowing practices are competitive or better than conventionally tilled methods after a 5-year transition period. However, in extreme weather conditions, organic systems out-yield conventional by up to 40%, using 45% less energy and releasing 40% fewer carbon emissions. Benefit number 4, RA produce greater profits for farmers. This study of 20 farms showed that although crop yields were lower by 29%, RA systems had 70% higher profits than conventional methods. The main reason for increased profits was due to using less inputs, such as seed and fertilizer. Added benefits included increased soil organic matter and diversity of insects that decreased the number of harmful pests, leading to stronger crops. Benefit number 5, RA creates drought and flood resistant soil. Soil organic matter determines the rate and quantity of surface water infiltration to reduce runoff and soil erosion during extreme weather conditions. Each 1% of soil organic matter holds up to 20,000 gallons more water per acre. Most farmlands today average less than 3 to 4% soil organic matter. This has caused severe soil erosion and fertilizer runoff pollution in many states. This makes it difficult to prevent crop loss during droughts and floods. Benefit number 6, RA nurtures biodiversity. Biodiversity is fundamental to agriculture production and food security. The lack of biodiversity has resulted in reliance on monoculture crops that are highly susceptible to hot weather events, disease and pests, as well as the loss of insects, such as bees, that are needed to pollinate our crops. Just as important is the loss of microbes in our soil that are needed to create healthy soils, plants, and animals. Benefit number 7, last but not least, RA protects waterways. RA practices increase water retention and decreases runoff pollution. Clean water is one of the biggest environmental priorities of the world today. Industrial agriculture is producing crisis-level runoff pollutions that are devastating to our rivers, streams, and oceans. The Mississippi River watershed crosses 22 states and carries nitrogen and phosphorus pollution runoff all the way to the Gulf of Mexico, where it has created one of the largest toxic dead zones in the world, 6,334 square miles. So I'll let you know, have a little background on RA. Let's talk a little bit about the Farm Bill. The Farm Bill, by the way, was supposed to pass in September of last year. It never happened. Now they're hoping to pass it this year. We're not sure if that's going to happen either. But what is the Farm Bill? This is a quote from Regenerate, America's campaign website. They are part of Kiss the Ground's coalition to promote new policies for the Farm Bill. The 2024 Farm Bill covers many different areas of legislation dealing with the agricultural system. The Farm Bill is one of the most important pieces of legislation passed by Congress. The total estimated cost of the new Farm Bill may be around $500 billion over 5 years, over $1.3 trillion over 10 years. It is renewed every 5 to 7 years. The next update is in 2024, hopefully. The Farm Bill is composed of 12 titles or areas as shown in this chart. The Chicago Metro Chapter Regenerative Agriculture Campaign Committee and the Climate Reality Project Regenerative Agriculture Coalition have created 6 policy recommendations for the 2024 Farm Bill that deal with several of these areas. Climate Reality Project leaders and chapter members have held several meetings with congressional staff members of Congress advocating for these RA and agroforestry policies. We hope Congress adds climate-smart agriculture policies to the new Farm Bill that reduce greenhouse gas emissions each year to help reverse global warming. Here are our top reasons for adding regenerative agriculture policies to the 2024 Farm Bill. Implement climate-smart or climate-friendly policies to mitigate climate change and meet UN emissions reduction goals. Stop industrial farming practices that are degrading our topsoil and polluting our rivers, lakes, and oceans. Help farmers and ranchers reduce input costs and increase profits. Increase crop yields in extreme weather conditions. Increase nutrient values in our food supply. Greatly reduce CO2 emissions by sequestering more carbon in our soil than we release into our atmosphere. All of these are important to us. We need to stop the current farming practices that are harming our environment and emphasize the great potential of sequestering carbon back into our soil to reach net zero CO2 emissions by 2040 or sooner. We can do all of this with the new Farm Bill. What you can do to help. Promote RA solutions to build healthy soil and biodiversity. Join our CRP RA coalition movement to participate in events. Join other RA organizations like the Illinois Stewardship Alliance to promote RA practices through actions, alerts, and advocacy efforts. Work to create awareness of RA's potential to combat climate change. Meet with Ag Committee members and members of Congress to advocate for climate-smart farm bills. Buy organic food products and support organic farmers. With your help, we can make a real difference. How can individuals help? Support regenerative farmers by looking for companies and foods that contain the Regenerative Organic Certified ROC label. Here are some products to look for in stores. Here are more things you can do. Ask questions at farmer markets. Do you grow organic crops? Are your crops diversified? Do you use no-till, cover crops, or other RA methods to grow crops? Do you use synthetic fertilizers or pesticides? Do you use rotational animal grazing methods? Are you ROC certified? Finally, educate yourself about RA. Here are some names of organizations you can check out on your own. They have numerous educational documents, videos, training materials, and case studies on regenerative farmers and ranchers. Once empowered, you can contact your legislators and tell them what can be done to stop and even reverse climate change. The Climate Reality Project, Regenerative Agriculture Coalition, has started a new campaign reaching out to farmers and ranchers to gather perspectives on agricultural policies that are shaping the future of farming and ranching. We are asking them to fill out a short questionnaire. It takes a few minutes, but their responses will be invaluable. We're interested in their views on conservation, agriculture, soil management techniques, and the potential impacts of these new policies on their farm or ranch. We are asking farmers and ranchers to tell their success stories using RA practices to members of Congress regarding the 2024 Farm Bill and funding in the Inflation Reduction Act. It will help us advocate more effectively for policies that support farmers and the environment. Feel free to pass on this survey to any farmers and ranchers who would like to participate. Here's a link for the survey. I guess I will have to add that to the chat. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to talk to you today. This completes my presentation on regenerative agriculture, best tool for combating climate change. I will now take questions. You can use the Zoom reaction screen and put your hands up there, or just I'll call on you if I see you raising your hand. Let me stop the sharing in this.
Don, there's two questions already in the chat. One is where to find the slide deck.
The slide deck is currently in our Google Drive folder. I will have to, if you put your email address in there, I can get back to you. If you don't, I can't get to you, but we can provide a link to the complete presentation and other resource material we have on our Google Drive. So just add your email address. You want a copy of this and I'll send it to you. Send you the link. Anyone else have their hand up? Let's see. I don't see any hands up. Any questions? Well, I guess Ted Weber, you're raising your hand. You have a question? Oh, you're on mute. Still mute. I can't hear you for some reason. All right. Well, while we're waiting for him to figure out how to unmute.
There's another question on the chat. Can you talk more about efforts to use the Farm Bill to remove the conservation distinction on funds allocated through the IRA?
Repeat the question.
Sure.
Are they trying to remove the funds or prevent removing the funds?
Efforts to use the Farm Bill to remove the conservation distinction on funds allocated through the IRA. So I guess if the caller is online, they can clarify this question.
Sure. Yeah, I've heard reports that there's people who are trying to use the Farm Bill to take away the sort of conservation, like some of the funding that was passed through the IRA to be used for conservation practices. That some of the Farm Bill discussion is around taking that distinction away so that funding can be used for other things. So I'm just curious if there's an update on that.
I'm aware of that. Yeah, it's an ongoing effort by the GOP to get more funds for safety nets, conservation, and/or commodity. That money is in the IRA, is strictly to be used for climate friendly, or what the USD term used, climate smart programs that actually will reduce greenhouse gases. That money, they want, some of the agricultural members want to make that a benchmark and use that money, add it to the Farm Bill. That can't be done without congressional action because it is a separate bill. And one of the chairpersons, Senator Debbie Stabenow, says that will not be allowed. They will not let the GOP take that money, the 20 billion, 19.5 billion in agricultural funds out of the IRA and use it to fund any of the commodity or conservation programs or other programs or safety nets in the Farm Bill. That is going to be kept separate unless something happens that I'm not aware of. All right, I have a question. I'll start at the top of the right here. Paul Popenchuk, you're up on there. Oh, that changed. Go ahead, Paul. Do you have a question?
Yes, sir, Don. Thanks so much for this presentation. That's excellent. There is a real concern about our agricultural brethren. Um, it has been estimated that if all the cattle in the world were treated as a nation, they would be the fourth biggest emitter behind the US, China, and the European Union. How do and all of this farming, so much of the farming that's done is to raise to feed cattle so that we can have a meat-based diet, we being the Western world. What can we do to uh, help a transition to a more vegetable-based diet and preserve the livelihoods of these farmers and ranchers who are going to be affected by that transition?
Well, you got several questions in here. Let me do some background stories first, though. Um, One of the biggest problems we have today is we've developed all these combined animal feeding organizations, and we've consolidated all these animals into those CAFOs. And the real pollution is coming from those. All the methane that can normally be emitted by CAFOs, what's happening is the pollution from those CAFOs are destroying a lot of the streams, polluting the streams, and creating a lot of toxic environments in the lakes. There is the best way to eliminate that is to stop the CAFOs and put the animals back into grazing methods. That will do a couple things. One, you won't have to continue to deforestate our land. The deforestation effect has been so great that it is causing on its own climate change. There's not enough trees left, and that needs to be stopped. Animals are part of nature's method of regulating the environment. The problem we have is we try to put them in pens. We need to take that out. Of course, reducing meat consumption would be great, but one of the problems a lot of people don't realize is 40% of our crops are devoted to feeding animals, not people. The other thing is 30% of our food is wasted. And so it's not, to me, it's never been a question that we have too many animals. We're just not using them, we're not grazing them properly, and we're not taking care of the pollution from the CAFOs. The other thing is agriculture itself, it doesn't emit as much carbon dioxide as burning fossil fuels, obviously. The real problem is methane and nitric oxide from fertilizer use, because farmers are using 50% more fertilizer than they really need. And if they use more RA, they can reduce that greatly and increase their profits. So there's a lot of contributing factors. I will just say that there are several things we can do to get people to eat more nutrition food, non-animal based food, but that's asking the population a lot. It's going to be a very difficult thing to do. All right, Ted, you had your question, your hand up? No, you're still not working, Ted. I don't know what it is. All right. I still not. Can anyone hear Ted besides me? Because I'm not getting Ted. Sorry, Ted. Put your question in the chat so that I can respond to you directly.
Don,
All right. Who else? Anyone else? We've got 10 minutes. No hurry.
I have a chat question, Don. Can you please go into more detail about how RA increases carbon sequestration?
I don't know how to say it differently than the slides. The regenerative agriculture is based on living root systems and keeping the ground covered. If we just kept the ground covered, we would reduce most of the carbon dioxide that is emitted into the atmosphere already. So that's one. Also, it would prevent things like dust storms, like we have down near Springfield over the last spring. The land, when it's not covered, is dirt. It's not healthy soil. And so it does nobody any good. But over the last 10,000 years, we have lost the potential of around 116 gigatons of stored carbon. And that's what people don't realize. Between deforestation, which is a loss of 1 trillion trees over the last 10,000 years, and the loss of all that carbon sequestration, that equals if you multiply that 116 gigatons of lost potential by 3.67, you would get 425 gigatons of excess legacy CO2 emissions that are currently up in our atmosphere. Right now, we're still emitting 10 to 11 gigatons more CO2 than we are drawing down. And we've done that for the last 50 years. So you can add another 200 plus gigatons of excess legacy carbon. And as I mentioned in one of my slides, we've got close to 1 trillion tons of excess legacy carbon in the atmosphere, warming our planet. And even if we reach net zero, every year it gets worse, it will stay that way while it takes years for us to draw down that excess carbon. So that's why it's critical. So I guess my answer is regenerative agriculture has the capability of drawing down more carbon than any other technological method we have simply through photosynthesis, which means we have to keep the ground covered. Did that answer your question, I hope? All right.
Someone's got their mic on and background noise.
Yeah, somebody's not muted. I can't tell with who it is without seeing them light up my screen. Then I can mute them. So please mute if you're not asking anything. All right. Couple things. As I said, the Climate Reality Project, our coalition is doing a campaign right now on farmers and ranchers. We're trying to reach out to farmers to tell their success stories, something that Senator Stabenow specifically asked, to try to advocate for the funding, climate-friendly funding in the Ag Bill to stay there, and to improve any new programs that are added or expanded in the current Farm Bill. We need to make sure that somehow it's reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And Debbie Stabenow felt that if we could get more farmers to tell their stories directly to specifically moderate Republicans who would be willing to vote for those type of programs, that would help us get a Farm Bill that will actually do some good. If we do the same thing with the Farm Bill that we've done in the past 5 to 10 years, we're not going to reduce any greenhouse gas emissions. For example, the emissions in the agricultural sector are increasing. That's more methane, more nitrous oxide, and even carbon dioxide by deforestation purposes. So we're not helping the problem unless we can reverse it. And the best way to do that is through the Farm Bill. So that's my spiel. That's what I'm trying to do with this campaign. So if you know some farmers and ranchers, we did an emailing to over 500 of them, and we're hoping to get enough responses that we can recontact these agricultural members of Congress, and you can contact your state members of Congress, specifically the moderate Republicans who are open to implementing some climate-friendly policies in this Farm Bill. That is very important. And we'll continue to do that until the bill passes. And hopefully, it won't take another 5 years to get some climate reduction policies in that Farm Bill. All right, we still got a couple minutes. I'm continuing the recording. Any other questions? Yes.
There's another question on the chat. How does monoculture lead to carbon loss?
Monoculture is it's a problem because it's not diversified. It's susceptible to insects, for one thing. Also, I read an article, the crops like corn and soybean, they've actually become addicted to fertilizer. They can't grow without it because the dirt is sterile. It is dirt. It's not healthy soil. Regenerative agriculture will help farmers build up the soil organic matter. That's living microorganisms. That's what feeds plants. That's what develops the nutrients like phosphorus and nitrogen that feed plants. Currently, one of the studies I just read, 50% of all the fertilizers they're using today are wasted. The plants can't take it. They still try to get what they can out of the ground, but it's just not working. Monoculture crops, nature abhors it. It will find a way to destroy it. Right now, for example, in Iowa, the heat from climate change destroyed thousands of acres of crops by June. They withered on the vine. And that's going to continue to happen as the environment heats up. We need to find ways to get farmers to change, regenerate their dirt to healthy soil, just as nature intended, because through photosynthesis, they get all the nutrients they need, and that draws down carbon. But we need to change it. As I said in one of my slides, the average soil organic matter level in most farms are under 4%. You need to get it to 6 or above to start reducing fertilizer input. One of the biggest problems today with farmers is they can't afford the price increases of the fertilizer. So they're trying to get a lot of money, like through the IRA, try to take that money and get subsidies or money that pay for the extra costs for fertilizers and insurance costs. And they're just going about it the wrong way. They need to build up their soil organic matter. That is the only thing that's going to help them. All right, any other questions? I think we got another minute before I probably should call it to the end. Anything I can help you with?
Don, there's another question on the chat. What about urban agriculture and increase in carbon footprint? How can we reduce those emissions in urban agriculture?
Well, urban agriculture is kind of unique. It's new because of the cities. We have in the Farm Bill, they have a title called forestry, and there is money set aside for agroforestry and forestry type things. And urban forestry, I know there are grants available. I just did a podcast in Detroit, and the urban farms are growing there. And there is money available through various grants and programs that will help urban farmers offer crops. And the other big food crops. The other advantage is there's money available to support them because they're trying to get food markets closer to the consumer. Right now, as was pointed out during the COVID episode, we rely on a lot of imports and exports for our food supply. And when those were cut off, a lot of people didn't have access to fresh food. The other thing I didn't mention, and there'll be a presentation on Thursday by another one of our members on the nutritional loss from current farming methods like monoculture crops. We have lost over 50% of the nutritional value of those food crops. So it takes a lot more food to get the same nutrients I got when I was a kid. It's just what we're doing today. Industrial farming practices are not helping us. They're actually harmful. All right, I think I'm out of time. I'm going to stop the recording. You gotta give you another minute to put your questions in the chat. Sorry if I didn't get to them all, but what I'll do is I'll go through it and respond. I'll send links to whatever you're asking for, one with this presentation. We also have other material. For example, we have our policy recommendations that have footnotes and scientific notes that back up what we're trying to promote and what we're advocating for. And I just want to thank everyone who attended this meeting. I hope it was helpful, educational. Like I said, we've been working on this for 3 years, and it took us almost a year just to understand what regenerative agriculture is and what it can do. So hopefully this has given you some information you can take to your members of Congress. So thank you, everybody.
Hey, Don.
Yes.
Don.
Yes.
In the chat, Dixie Wong wants to join your group. How does she do that?
Well, is that the Chicago group? Or is that the CRP, our organization? We're one of 139 chapters in 22 states. We allow anyone who wants to become involved in what we're doing to join the Chicago Metro chapter. Put that in the chat. I'll get back to you with a link how to do that. You can also go online, and I'll send you a link how to join the Climate Reality Project, Al Gore's group. We are 50,000 plus members strong. They're holding training currently virtual. Well, it's in real live training in New York City, and there's a training scheduled, I think, in April in Detroit. And I got virtual training in 2020. So there are ways to do it. Just give me an email address, and I'll get back to you with a link. Thank you, everybody. I'm going to stop the recording and then end this presentation, but thank you again